Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast alongside John Macon Gillespie. How you doing, John?
I am incredible. Here in Oxford, getting ready for game week, things leading up to the game and everything. So it's a good time to be here. It's a good time to feel the energy that's kind of building a little bit for Saturday.
All right, and let's see. Sunday, I think it was Sunday. You sent out a tweet and you did a story on inside the Manning Center. There's basically it's no longer a question of if he's the quarterback. There's no confusion of what's going on. What was that story about? And fill us in about that.
Yeah. So a source with knowledge of the situation has told the Grove Report, myself, that it's not a question anymore if Jaxson Dart is QB1. And obviously things could change. Things may be misunderstood, whatever. Lane Kiffin could pull a rabbit out of the hat on Saturday. But the things that we have reported to this point, you and I both, regarding Jaxson Dart appear to be accurate, that he is going to be the guy. And that's just kind of where things stand right now. I always throw that caveat in there because until there's official word from the program, there's always a chance things could change. But for now, that's, I think, what fans should go with.
The funny thing is, whenever I talk about this quarterback competition, it has more in common with the Chad Kelly, Ryan Buchanan, quarterback competition than even last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I remember that competition vividly, actually, because to date myself a little bit, I was a senior in high school. And I was actually at that first game just as like a spectator. And I remember seeing all three quarterbacks took snaps against UT Martin. And I remember seeing Chad Kelly and then Devontae Kincaid and Ryan Buchanan. And I was like, yeah, this is not a competition. This is completely one-sided. This is Chad Kelly's team. And obviously that season played out pretty well. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of it's a little bit smoke and mirrors a little bit maybe. But that's kind of how I see it too. Yeah.
Yeah, the video that I put out today, by the way, I have saved this hot take for the whole summer to put this video out there. And the take is Jaxson Dart is the best quarterback in the Southeastern Conference.
I think it's pretty darn close, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. Like I really do think it's really close. I think he's definitely top three if he's not number one. Like, and that's that. We may catch flack for that, but that's just how I see it. Like with the turnover that we had in the SEC at the quarterback position a year ago, leading into this year, man, it's pretty dang close. With Dart making the jump that he's made, I think it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, and I think honestly, this is going to be an absolutely weird thing. So anybody you can bookmark it here, right here. You can clip it from this point. But the two quarterbacks that are going to be the top quarterbacks in the Southeastern Conference this year is Devin Leary and Jaxson Dart.
I can see it. Yeah, I mean, and that's there may be some sound bites of that if things don't play out right, but I think we're kind of on the same page there. That with the way things look right now, yeah, I can definitely see that, and that may be kind of difficult to accept for Ole Miss fans for the first couple weeks, just because of how they saw Dart a year ago, who was fine, by the way. I mean, Jaxson Dart was fine a season ago, but he was not the best quarterback in the SEC, right? I mean, that's bar none. I think that may be coming, that he's definitely going to be in that conversation.
It'll be really interesting whenever we kick off against Mercer. Either Jaxson Dart is going to take off and everybody's going to look like a genius, or everybody's going to be tuning in Monday to say, hey, Steve, what? Yeah,
Yeah.
that type situation.
Yeah, and I think Mercer is all kind of. I mean, you don't love to open the season against an FCS opponent, especially Mercer, who didn't look great against UNA on Saturday. Um, but at the same time, you kind of look at it and it's like, okay, if we name Jaxson as the starter, we being Lane Kiffin names Jaxson Dart as the starter, that is a good opportunity for him to show what he is capable of in week one and kind of unite the fan base a little bit behind that. So it may wind up being the perfect storm. It may wind up not being a bad thing. So
Yeah, you have a situation like, just so the audience knows, we're recording this on a Sunday. So Lane Kiffin on Monday, before this video airs, could completely make all of this moot. But I think Jaxson Dart deserves to be named the starter so he can take that victory lap a little bit. He can excel a little bit and kind of just get ready for the game, that he doesn't no longer has to worry about this. He's the dude.
yeah, and I think just the tidbits picked up from his teammates, especially at wide receiver, have kind of touched on this, that the chemistry with all three guys is fine. Like, I mean, it's Ole Miss can win games with all three guys. I think it would be foolish to say that they couldn't. But it seems like the wide receivers, especially, and maybe the rest of the offense, really have united behind Jaxson a little bit. And that may be continuity from a year ago. It may just be because they like Jackson's personality. I don't know. Jackson's a really cool kid. Like, he's got a good personality. But it just kind of seems like it's all going in that one direction, not just with the jump that he's made, but with the chemistry with the offense. So I don't know. We'll see. And Lane may throw a wrench, and it would be somewhat horrible for us, but it would be kind of hilarious if he trotted Spencer out there for the first snap, and then it was Jaxson Dart from there on out. I mean, that would just kind of be textbook Lane. So,
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Literally everybody in the fan base, everybody, with the exception of one person, says Jaxson Dart. And that one person is the person that makes the decision.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredibly true. And I mean, I for one, when Spencer Sanders transferred to Ole Miss, I honestly thought, okay, Jackson's in trouble. Seriously, like during the offseason, I thought Jaxson Dart was going to be in trouble. But then obviously Spencer was injured. Jaxson made a jump that I have talked about, that I've seen personally, and that others have seen who know more about schematics than I do. And it has the narrative has definitely been pretty much one-sided since spring practice. It has seemed that Jaxson was going to be the guy, and if he kept on this trajectory, he was going to be the guy. And that's still where the direction is pointing.
Not to change the subject, but we'll change it here real quick. This weekend on week 0, there were new clock rules that went into effect, and the average time of the game is 3 minutes shorter than it was last season, but it is 13 to 14 plays less than it was for last season. I'm a person that thinks that anytime it is less football, that's not a good situation. But this, I mean, they have to pay the bills. I get the commercials. I get all of that stuff, but just make halftime shorter. Make the breaks less long. Instead of a 4-minute break, let's go down to a 3-minute break. And stuff like that could probably do a well of a lot of good.
Oh, I will applaud that they realize that there is a game length problem, but the game length problem doesn't come from the football. It doesn't come from the clock stopping after first downs. It comes from the length of commercial breaks. I mean, it's just to put it out there. I do think halftime is probably too long, but you're also dealing with college athletes. It's 5 minutes shorter than the NFL. I do get that. But make your commercial breaks shorter. Okay, I think that college football, now I haven't seen numbers for this, but I do think that college football is going to make a killing even if you cut a minute off of your commercial breaks. I mean, that's just and fans hate them, especially on the SEC CBS games, which won't be a thing for, after the season. Fans hate them. The media hates them. I hate when I see, okay, we have a break. There's the kickoff after the touchdown. I mean, that is ridiculous. I absolutely hate it. And that is what is causing the game to slow down. It is not the clock stopping after first downs. People don't really care about that. In my opinion, I think it's fine. So, I mean, that part will take a little getting used to, but the problem is the length of the commercial breaks. And granted, I'm not an executive at ESPN or CBS or wherever, but that is the problem that I see, is that the commercial breaks are too often and too long when they happen. And it takes away from the flow of the game. It takes away from what fans want out of the game. And it contributes to this problem. And that's what I think it is.
You're probably too young to understand this or know what I'm about to tell you. But before TV was a really prevalent thing. Let's say Ole Miss was playing Vanderbilt and there was no TV. It was just a radio thing when there was no red hat. And those games were almost more enjoyable to watch, more enjoyable to listen to. I imagine in the stadium, more enjoyable to see that, and probably was not near the time commitment that you're used to. Just taking away that, and they need to be conservative to the point where it's trending that direction as opposed to the vice versa.
Yeah, and I do remember when Ole Miss games weren't readily accessible on television. I mean, pay-per-view was a thing, whatever. But I grew up listening to Ole Miss games with David Kellum, essentially. I mean, that was my thing during the times when they weren't on national TV because they weren't any good, basically. And so I do recognize that as the sport has grown, the sponsors have grown too, which is good for the sport on one hand. I'm not going to say that it's not, but it is kind of bad for the fans on the other hand, because the breaks just take so long and they are so often. I mean, in the press box, I mean, the game that kicks off at 1:00 on Saturday, we're probably not going to get into the press conference until 5 or later, if I had to assume. And then for media, granted, that's just the perspective that I have. I mean, we're not out of there until 6 or 6:30, and that's with a 1:00 kickoff. So fans obviously will get out of there earlier than that, but still, I mean, it's not a good situation, I don't think, and I think it has taken the fans out of the equation. It's taken the game experience out of the equation, in the name of money, which I get is the driving force, but yeah, still.
All right, let's turn our attention to the Mercer Bears and the Week 1 matchup. All right, I'm just going to put you on the spot. How do you think it plays out? Give me a score.
After watching Mercer in Week 0, man, like 49-14 Ole Miss, because I think Ole Miss calls the dogs off, and I think it's bad at halftime. And I think Mercer's a fine FCS team. I think they're okay. But after watching things in Week 0, because I did watch a good bit of that game before the lightning delay, Ole Miss should not have any trouble. This should not be one of those weird FCS games where the FBS team is, kind of playing with its food a little bit. I think Ole Miss wins and wins super easily. The biggest storyline that I think right now is cramping. I mean, it's the heat that's going to obviously be there on Saturday. Yeah, I don't think Ole Miss has any trouble at all on Saturday.
All right, and the other question is, if it is out of hand at halftime, let's say Ole Miss is up 35-0 at halftime, do you put in Spencer Sanders or you go straight to Walker Howard?
I think Lane Kiffin puts in Spencer Sanders. Personally, I might put in Walker Howard if I were the head coach, but I think just to not necessarily save face, but for PR purposes almost, I do think Spencer Sanders will see some reps on Saturday.
Thanks for making the Locked On. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just because the quarterback competition has been such a focal point, I do think Spencer will see some snaps. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and also if Ole Miss fans thinks that quarterbacks competitions over the last 2 years have been tiresome, let Jaxson Dart go pro and Walker Howard and Austin Simmons be a thing. Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. That's good for us for content, but
yeah,
still, man, it does get tiring.
yeah, it's the same thing over and over again. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day is also tomorrow, Pratt Rogers. Wednesday, we're still working on. Thursday, we have the voice of the Mercer Bears going to be on the show. Friday, Tom Vanderford. Saturday, pregame and postgame. And Sunday, we're going to let that postgame breathe a little bit. That'll be your content schedule for the week. Of course, the Locked On Ole Miss podcast every morning at 6 a.m. Central. Anyway, thank you so much, John Macon Gillespie, for stopping by. Really cool article. I don't know if I want to give you credit for breaking that, but it was still really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that it's breaking necessarily because I think most people have thought that, but it was cool just to kind of have it sourced and to throw it out there and let fans think of it what they will. So
yeah, and the good thing about it is, like I said, this is airing after the press conference. So this answer, everybody's probably watching this and going, "Of course this happened," but we're recording it before that press conference, and maybe that means that in the press conference there was something going to get named.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting deal. Anyway, thank you very much, man, for stopping by, and we'll see you Saturday.
All right. Always a pleasure, Stephen. Thank you.
All right, man.